Here is the happy conclusion to a story which began just 3 weeks ago, when this young man arrived at a Ford main dealer's in search of a job. The reception office couldn't have been easier to find, and he was dealt with promptly. Having an appointment with the service manager, he was shown to his office and politely asked to wait. Ken, that was his name, was not unnaturally a bit nervous, and he hoped he'd be able to hide it during the interview. He took a look round and noticed that the office was designed to give the service manager a clear view of all that went on in the reception area. A car had just arrived, and Ken watched customer and receptionist together, wondering what they were saying.
Have you got a voucher, sir?
Yes. Here it is.
Thank you.
Well, that looks after the monthly oil and grease. But can you do it by this afternoon? Got an important date.
Oh, yes, sir. You can have it by 11 o'clock.
Jolly good. And could you also check the brakes?
We'll look after it, sir.
Wacko. See you later.
Good morning, sir.
And if you ask me, it's due for a Coke. I'm not getting the acceleration I used to. Sluggish, that's what it is. Sticky valves, probably.
You've had your car 4 years and travelled 46,000 miles.
High time for a Coke, then.
I'll get a tester's report on your engine. It may need a reconditioned one.
Listen, I'm not made of money. If it's just the valve...
It might be cheaper in the long run. You've got the advantage of everything new.
Good morning. Johnson? Sorry to have kept you waiting. Sit down, will you?
Not the best introduction, but no one is at their best at an interview, as this manager knew well.
You've come in answer to our advertisement for a receptionist?
Yes, that's right, sir.
How much experience have you had?
Not very much, I'm afraid. I was a mechanic at my last place, but I was transferred once to reception for a week. We had to move here for family reasons.
Have you ever taken a Ford mechanics course at Dagenham?
Yes, but it was a long time ago.
Ah, good. But why change to receptionist?
Well, I've always wanted to get on to the administrative side.
So you want to become a service manager? And you think being a receptionist would be a step in the right direction?
Well, yes, sir.
In spite of Ken's nervousness, the service manager had faith in him and gave him the job. Then began a period of training under the senior receptionist. Until recently, there was no other way to train a new man. The trouble was that a good receptionist was not necessarily a good teacher. After 20 years, for example, this man knew the standard repair charges off by heart. Ken would have to learn them himself in due course. Meanwhile, it was comforting to know that the official price lists were printed for each model and could always be looked up. In contrast, the service manager, Mr. Goddard, went out of his way to put Ken at ease and insisted on showing him round the place himself. Both in the repair shop and for pre-delivery inspection, all cars were neatly separated between white lines. Mr. Goddard explained how this system saved space by using the available floor efficiently, and still gave the mechanics plenty of room to work. An equal amount of thought and planning had gone into the layout of the stores, which were placed in a central position where the various departments could draw from them most easily. Every conceivable spare part for every Ford model was stocked, and in such a way that even the most obscure component could be found and drawn in a few seconds. As an ex-mechanic, Ken was quite familiar with the special tools rack. He immediately spotted that the oil seal replacer had been withdrawn. This special tool is designed to do one job and one job only, and it can be applied to every console and zephyr in the country. But the most spectacular tool of all was the diagnosis test set. With it, you can check a couple of dozen different operations on one engine. Ken and Mr. Goddard watched distributor points being checked electrically with a stroboscope. Customers rarely have a chance of seeing this amazing instrument, which is made specifically for Ford, although here they were quite familiar with hydraulic lifts, which were placed near the reception area. Even then, they didn't always realize that a Ford lubrication always included an inspection for lurking faults. Broken springs, for example. So the tour went on, and even if Ken was only able to get a glimpse of the many individual departments, he was able, possibly for the first time, to see the dealer organization in which he worked in its true perspective. In his new job as receptionist, he might be called on to deal with any department, as well as being a representative of his firm to the general public. But Ken still had an enormous amount to learn the hard way. And while the senior receptionist was later explaining how the progress of every car is known and recorded, they were interrupted by the arrival of a customer. As there's nothing like practical experience, Ken was asked to deal with her.
Oh, good morning. I've brought my car in because it's got a noise and it's inside.
In the engine, madam.
Ken made the mistake of jumping to conclusions, which is always wrong, especially with this sort of customer. A fault in the engine was right up his street. He'd show 'em. But in trying to impress the customer and the senior receptionist, he managed to make almost every mistake in the book.
Good morning, Miss Clutterbuck.
Oh, good morning. This nice man is trying to find a noise in my gears.
Gears. Just like a woman, thought Ken. But it was his own fault. The senior receptionist quickly sorted things out and handed the car over to a tester, which is what Ken should have done in the first place. It is not a receptionist's job to do a full diagnosis on the spot. It holds everyone else up. The customer was escorted firmly but politely to the waiting room, and Ken... No wonder Ken looked depressed. It wasn't long before he found himself back in the service manager's office, but not for the lecture he expected. Mr. Goddard had been reading about a new training course for Ford receptionists, and the idea appealed to Ken. He didn't want to make mistakes. Mr. Goddard got on to Dagenham straight away. He tried to put Ken on that course immediately. Another visit to the Ford plant at Dagenham would be no novelty for Ken, but a course for receptionists at the service school was something new.
Remember, the receptionist is the link between this Ford service and the outside world. It is upon your smart appearance, your good manners, your promptness and efficiency that customers will form their judgment of the dealership you represent. Remember that reception is fundamentally a personal service job.
While Ken was attending his first lecture on reception, others in this school dedicated to Ford service were busy with courses on a whole range of different subjects. Fuel injection for diesel engines, for example. In another room, a refresher course on car radios was in progress. The idea of a course for service managers always seemed to amuse mechanics, whose own lectures were purely technical and included subjects like transmission systems for every Ford car and commercial vehicle on the road. These glimpses of the school give some idea of the technical knowledge and of the spirit which lie behind Ford service. But the new course for receptionists was a course with a difference. The school had never seen anything like this before. A car drives up with a trainee receptionist playing the part of customer, and Ken had to receive him. Lucky this was only the school's car. He had placed his repair order form with its large metal clip on the bonnet, with the risk of scratching the paintwork. But Ken was keen to learn, and made good progress, and so it wasn't long before he was back at his old job full of confidence. The senior receptionist immediately recognized the first car to arrive, and although he sensed trouble, he thought he'd test Ken and see just what the course had done for him. Little did Ken realize that his first customer was going to be quite a test. Owners of new cars do not expect them to develop mysterious rattles, particularly Gilbert Harding. Those'll make a rattling good story.